Up next, we are joined by Trevor Young, Chief Product Officer at Security Compass, and Mrunmayee Athawale, Senior Product Manager at Security Compass. Their session today is What Developers Want for Application Security Training and Education. If you have any questions for our speakers, please put them into the Q&A and they will answer them at the end of their session. Trevor and Mrun, you can take it from here.
Great, thanks, Raquel. All right, looks like we got a few people joining, so I'll give it 2 seconds just to wait till everybody's up. Excuse me. So first off, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. As you know, this is the first all virtual conference that we've run as an organization. It looks like we got a really great turnout, and hopefully you guys are taking something important away with you. So as Raquel mentioned, my name is Trevor Young. I'm the product officer at Security Compass, and I've got Mrunmayee with me, who's the product manager for our e-learning and our training product here. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about what developers want when it comes to application security training and education. So specifically, we did a number of research activities over the course of the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And so we're going to spend about half of the time talking about what we learned from that exercise. I'll go into some of the details there, but we thought that was something that would be valuable to share with the rest of the people that are attending the conference today. And then after that, we'll show you how you can apply some of those in practice by doing a couple demos with the products that we have to offer you guys. And then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for some discussion and QA. I've got a couple thoughts on sort of the future of education and training and where we think it's going in the near term. And we'd also love to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts on this as well. So we'll go through and do a bit of an intro and overview. Hopefully you guys already have a good sense of what product offerings we have and who Security Compass is, but I'll set the stage for that a little bit. We'll spend probably about 20 minutes on sort of the results we've seen from various research activities, applying the concepts, and then we'll get into the discussion after that. So for those who aren't very familiar with Security Compass, the company's been around for a while, and really our vision has been to build and live in a world where we can trust technology. Our goal really is to help other organizations that are building products and services in the digital world to ensure that they're secure, so that all of the customers and the users of those applications can feel confident and have trust that they don't have to worry about their data being compromised or anything. To achieve that, we've got 3 different products and services that we focus on. SD Elements, which you guys may have seen a demo of already or heard spoken of, is our core platform that really focuses on secure development, threat modeling, and software security risk assessments. What we're going to focus on a little bit more today is our security e-learning library. And with that, we've got practitioner certification, who we partner with ISC² with. We've got just-in-time training modules, and then we have a new pilot that we've released, which is a virtual learning lab. And then lastly, we have an advisory and a consulting arm of our business that focuses on security consulting, things like pen testing and red teaming and things like that. Most of our client profile are large international organizations with hundreds to thousands of developers, lots of internal systems, billions in revenue. So most of our focus is really going to be on large organizations and how you scale education and training, although it's still very applicable to some of the smaller organizations that are out there. Just before we get into the research details, as much as possible, I'd love to keep this interactive. I know that's difficult over a virtual session, but we've got some really nice tools in here where you guys can ask questions of us. You can enter into the chat. So I'll try to pause every now and again. If there's any part of the topics that you want to dig into further, please feel free to ask questions about it or enter some items in the chat. I'm happy to dig into some of those a little bit further. Otherwise, I'll keep pushing forward. But yeah, if anything comes up that you guys want to dig into more, use the tools in the ref, and then I'll ask Mrunmayee to interrupt me and we can talk about that a little bit further. Oops. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag here. Okay, so first of all, what did we do in terms of research? So just so you guys don't think this is my personal opinion on some of these things, we're a very product-driven organization, and as such, we're very data-driven when it comes down to what we deliver in our product offerings. And so on a regular basis, we run a lot of industry surveys with external agencies. We also conduct a lot of developer interviews, usability tests, And then we have a large customer base of enterprise clients who provide us regular feedback, and we do lots of interviews with them as well. So for this particular session, I'm focusing on a survey we did that was specific to software security training and education. So we we ran a survey with 200 developers as well as development managers, primarily in the US and the UK, back in November of last year. And we got some really good results from that. Following that, we sort of took some of that information and we wanted to dig deeper into a few areas. So we also set up interviews with a number of developers, ranging in experience from junior to senior, as well as development managers. So what we were hoping to really dig into there was take some of the findings of the survey and then get a little bit more information hands-on. So we spent time interviewing them as well as doing some interactive sessions and testing some ideas and usability sessions to see what would be of most interest and most value to them when it comes to education and training. And then lastly, we sort of layered on all of the other feedback we get on a recurring feedback loop basis from our existing customers across SD Elements, e-learning, and our advisory. Okay, so why did we do this? Primarily this was for selfish reasons. We want to improve our product and our service offering and make sure we're continuing to deliver on the vision that we have. Our product team is very focused on the end customer, so we invest fairly heavily in industry research and understanding our user needs. But ultimately, we're looking to understand sort of the who, what, how, why, and when is security, training, and education important. So, what are the frustrations, the problems that developers face when it comes to training and reference material? What level of maturity and security knowledge exists across the organizations that are out there today? We also wanted to assess the reception of developers to different techniques, some that exist today and some that we're looking forward to potentially building into our product line. And then the other one we really wanted to dig into was distinguishing the needs of the developer versus the business decision makers, or the ones that are actually setting up these programs and offering them, and then the ones that are actually using it, which are the developer base for the most part. We got lots of data back from all of this information. We have reams of spreadsheets and we've sliced and diced it in many different ways. So we tried to pick out the ones that we felt would be most relevant to you guys. Some of it's obviously, things we'll keep close to our chest and we may build out and show you guys later on. But these are the ones that we felt were, fairly relevant to you, things that you could take away from the session, hopefully apply it to your own organizations. And maybe you guys can give us some feedback as well during the session on, whether these things are hitting the mark, if you're experiencing the same things, or maybe there's some things that we completely missed on here that you guys can highlight for us and things that we can look into a little bit further in the future. So with that, I'll jump right into some of the data. Like I said, we'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes covering some of the insights. Happy to talk about them in more detail if you guys find them interesting. And then we'll flip over to show you some of how this can be implemented in practice. So the first thing I wanted to bring up was just a bit of a level set. So, a couple of the questions we asked were sort of to establish the baseline of what's out there. And some of the responses were interesting, some not so much. Unsurprisingly, about 90% of the respondents have an existing security training program for their engineering and their software development teams in place. Given the type of organizations that we were targeting, they're highly regulated, they have massive scale, and so it's not surprising that a lot of them have these programs in place. I'd still like to see that closer to 100%, but 90% is pretty good within that industry. Most of them were leveraging courseware from specialized security providers, with a little bit using some instructor-led training and some interactive training. But it was fairly common that, the tried and traditional methods of e-learning have been applied throughout most of these organizations. One thing that we found was really interesting was, of the developers that we surveyed, 60% of them rated their application security experience as expert or great. So this kind of implies that either they have a little bit of hubris and they, think that they know everything already and they don't necessarily need more training. Or on the other side of it, it could be that, security is becoming so prevalent and it's being recognized as a really critical part that companies are investing in more and more people that have security expertise. You'll see a little bit later, I think some of the survey results don't necessarily reflect the self-assessment of the developers in this survey, but certainly they seem to think that they are experts or great, or they already have a really strong knowledge in this. And then the other one that was fairly common and a good general observation, again, not very surprising, was there was two distinct types of training. The more prominent one was the mandatory compliance-based security awareness training. So, most organizations, particularly in highly regulated industries, need to do this. They need to prove that they've provided this training to the developers and others in the organization. And then on top of that, in some cases, they also had more developer-centric security guidance and education. So the two have fairly distinct objectives around them. And most organizations certainly had the compliance part of it, and everybody's familiar with that. And then a smaller subset of them actually had more developer-centric training programs. Okay, so you're going to see a number of these charts. So I'll give you a quick explanation of how some of them are laid out. But this is representative of the questions that we asked. We asked the developers to rank where the source of answers, when they have a secure coding question, where do they look? And so the orange means that they ranked it as number 1, the navy blue ranked as number 2, and then so on. So the focus on this chart is really the bottom part, and the ones that have the most orange means they ranked at 1, and the blue means they ranked at 2. Again, nothing terribly mind-boggling here, but the one thing that stood out to me on this is that search engine and site-specific searches stood out as the sort of number 1 source in terms of where they go to look for answers, primarily because it's fairly simple. You can type in a query and you can get your answers back fairly quickly. That was closely followed by colleagues and peers or corporate training, including sort of internal knowledge bases and repositories as a close second. This comes back when we do the interviews with the individual developers, so I'll expand on that a little bit more in the future, but it was interesting to see sort of the breakdown. Live events, conferences like these, webinars were sometimes useful, but they were usually for sort of one-off topics on an irregular basis. So on a daily basis, they tended to go to these sources of information that were available to them and easy to find that information. And again, like I said, if there's any of these things you want to dig into a little bit further, please enter anything into the chat or the comments. I'm going to keep pushing through this and highlight some of the ones that are more interesting, and then we'll get into some of the demos. This one was a bit of a surprise to me, but although be it a pleasant one. We asked the question, how frequently you find yourself needing to look up a security topic, and over 70% indicated they were doing this on a daily basis or at least once or twice a week. There's still 28% of people that are only doing it once a month or very rarely. But I thought this was, could be interpreted in 2 different ways. It's either a reflection of, how security is now prevalent with engineering, and so they're continually having to, look up security topics and then find them to incorporate them into their day-to-day. But the flip side of that is if it's not easy for them to find that information and they're doing this on a daily basis, it can be really challenging and can really slow you down. So if you're having to look up security topics on a daily basis and you aren't one of the lucky ones to be an expert in the field, if you don't find it in the first source, you go to the second, you go to the third. If you don't have somebody that's done it before that you can lean on, it can really slow down the ability to get product to market in a secure and efficient way. So this is great that people are sort of engaged. It means that the industry is actually paying attention to security and it's a high priority with them. But on the downside, if it's really hard for them to find what they need, it can really slow their time to market. I'd be interested to hear from some of the people that are attending if this is a reflection of what they see within their own organizations, if their developers are expected to be dealing with security items on a daily basis, or if it's more infrequent, more sort of on a once-a-month type of a scale. So this question was more focused on the usefulness of the type of content as opposed to the source of the content. So it's a similar ranking system. You can see the orange and the blue at the bottom are the ones that reflect the highest ranked items. The one that really stands out here is source code samples. So this was specifically the developers responding to this question. And you can see that by far source code and example code makes up 35% of the group as their number 1 source. And the combination of 1 and 2 was still fairly high. It's nice to see that it's closely followed by organizational best practices. And through our interviews, we know that a lot of organizations have their own, either policies, guidelines, code sample repositories, or other areas. And so I think that that's a great indication that if they can find what they need internally that's been sourced by their own team and security experts, they'll lean on that. If not, they sort of go to outside sources. And then, nice to see general e-learning modules and articles. They trail a little bit, but they're still valid. One of the things we were really looking to understand was whether developers take this training once and then they don't come back to it, or whether they continue to reference it on an ongoing basis and it still adds value outside of just sort of completing the quiz and marking that you've actually finished the course. The other one we added here, and this is a bit of a leading sort of question in terms of what we're looking at doing in the future of the product, but as I was saying, if you go to the first source and you can't find it, you go to another source, it can really slow you down. And so one of the things that we were looking for from developers was whether or not they would find it useful to have a consolidated or an aggregated single query search that could actually go across all of those different sources of information and provide them an answer much quicker. Not surprisingly, over 90% of people said they would use it. Like I said, it's probably hard to say no to that one, but we're looking to follow up on how we can do better at sort of finding and curating the expert material that's out there, the best practices, and then provide a one-stop shop for them to get everything they need when it comes to security and training. We had a number of questions around gamification and interviewed around that. And this one, again, maybe not so surprising to most people, but for me, it was a bit surprising. We asked specifically some questions on gamification, but leaderboards was one that really stuck out. And so personally, I have never been a big user of these, but obviously I'm not in the developer mindset here. But the question was that if your company used a leaderboard with points for content consumed, would they opt into it? And overwhelmingly 90+% of the developers said that they would. And then, probably more important was we followed up with a question of how that would impact your consumption of that material. So would you consume, would you view, would you read more training material and education material if it was leading to a leaderboard and sort of highlighted your skill set or your reputation? And again, most developers said they would be more likely to do that. So a great indication for those out there, if you have leaderboards, if you have gamification implemented in your programs, developers definitely love that. They like to see the reputation of both the team and the individuals, and it's something that they're looking forward to. There's some other interesting data we'll get to later that shows it's not necessarily a priority in people's systems, but certainly something that the end users are keen on participating in. This data point was interesting because I thought it spoke to some of the challenges that the program managers have in reporting and tracking at the employee level. So an LMS or a learning management system is fairly common when you have enterprise security programs. What was surprising to me was how many that people are managing. So this question wasn't just for security LMSs, but it could include any training for developers, corporate safety, role-based training, etc. But I was surprised to see the number of people that had more than 4 LMS systems internally. And then the question that I have beside that I thought was relevant because the way that they measure the success of these programs comes down to how they monitor and the reporting, predominantly the completion of this training content or how many people have completed it. And you can see most of them rely on the LMS system. So if you have 4 or 5 different LMS systems, it would be really hard to get a sense of how an individual employee or a team is progressing on their training across each of those different types of content that are out there. Some HR systems out there have the ability to integrate those, but you can see 62% have to export all that into a consolidated report, whether it's a spreadsheet or a BI system. So, it's definitely challenging for the managers of these programs to aggregate all of that information from a variety of systems and then pull it together in a report to get a sense of how successful that program is. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. This one was important for us because we had a hypothesis that there wasn't necessarily alignment between the developers as the end users and the people that were running the programs. So we wanted to understand the main driver behind the company having a secure development training program. And it wasn't overly surprising, but I guess I was a little surprised by you can see that the number one need, the 41%, needed to do it for compliance purposes. So really, it's a check the box type of an exercise. And then second to that was to achieve the business goals of improving the security of software across the organization. And then in a distant fourth, you've got the engineers are asking for it or they want it. I was surprised to see how many have contractual requirements around it or the customers that demand it. But again, I think in the people that we've interviewed in the survey results that we saw, compliance was typically a primary driver, some sort of an awareness training, and business needs were generally secondary. And I think, In some cases, people are hoping to kill two birds with one stone. If they can have a program that satisfies compliance and it achieves their business goals, then great. But in practice, it didn't seem like that was always the case. So usually the compliance-based training, wasn't necessarily engaging. It was sort of something that happens on a yearly or quarterly basis that the developers and the other project team members weren't necessarily keen on. And it wasn't really delivering what they wanted from a developer perspective in terms of how it can help them do their job. But it was more of a compliance like requirement. So I think that's fairly common. And I think it's something that we would like to definitely do a better job of with the offering that we have. Best and the worst. So we asked the developers and the managers what they liked best about their current developer training. Again, self-paced seems fairly common in most things out there today, so I was surprised that that was still high on the list. But again, you'll see the developers overwhelmingly selected code samples as their number one, or as their number two behind the self-paced learning, whereas the managers were more focused on the just-in-time training. So you see a bit of deviation between what the managers thought was best and the code and the actual developers thought was best. And then trailing those, you've got video how-tos and blog posts and some other items that are out there. We try to combine all of these things into our program offerings and the products that we offer, but we'll show you guys how we do that in the demo stage. In contrast, we asked them the worst elements of training, and again, this was more focused on the developers, but you can see here that the content is really the focus here. So the depth of the content, followed closely by how up-to-date that content is, was of primary importance. And I think this speaks to, when you have a lot of more experienced people, they don't necessarily want beginner level content. And just the very nature of technology in general and security, there's new releases of vendors all the time. There's constantly growing vulnerabilities. So it's quite an effort to keep the content up to date and make sure it's relevant, as well as have the level of breadth and depth that can address the needs of a broad organization, with lots of distributed development teams working on a variety of different things. One of the things I think is worth noting is that, if the developers are asking for more depth, it might suggest that the general maturity and the knowledge of the community is increasing, and so they want to dig deeper into it. Either that or it's becoming a little bit more pervasive and they need more than just sort of a light touch on it. They want to go a little bit deeper. So overall, from our perspective, that's a good thing. It's good for us to see that people want more and they want more depth, they want more coverage, they want more recent things. So overall, that's a positive signal from our perspective. This was interesting because when you compare what people felt were the most valuable or what they felt were the best elements to what were the priorities for this year, there's a bit of a deviation here. And so you can see that improving the overall content, that's fairly consistent across both the developers and the managers. And then there's a fairly steep drop off, and you see the variance here where things like just-in-time training is higher on the priority list for developers, but that was not necessarily high on their list of what was most most desired by them or what they felt was most useful. Conversely, you see the code snippets as being lower by the software developers in terms of what they felt the priority was. And then gamification also fairly low when you look at it across the spectrum here. So, this might be an indication of a mismatch or a misalignment between what the managers are setting as the priorities for the training programs or what the business is setting and what the developers are actually looking for. But that was an interesting data point for us as well. I'll just take a quick pause here and just check and see if there's anything in the chat or in the questions. Doesn't look like there's many people asking things. So I'll keep pushing on, but again, feel free to drop anything in the chat box of the Q&A session if you have any questions you want to dig into anything further. All right, I'll quickly go through some of the interview results. So we concluded the survey, we took a bunch of that information back, and then we did a follow-up where we met with a number of developers in person. We did some interviews and we did some usability sessions and tested various things. One of the things that really stood out and that you don't get out of the surveys is the types of personas that you're dealing with. So in the interviews that we did, 3 of them sort of stood out to me, and it was really what they were motivated. They were motivated by different things. So there was one group that were really motivated by making it fun and engaging. So this tended to be the group that saw the mandatory compliance training as a little bit dry, and so their attitude was more of if you're going to make me do this on a regular basis, at least make it fun and engaging for me. And so that was sort of their attitude. It was something that was just a necessary blocker and they had to get out of the way, but they at least wanted to be a little bit more engaging than what they typically experience. The other one was give me something that will make my job easier. So there's a set of developers that felt security and other non-functional requirements were sort of getting in the way of them developing the core platform, the applications that they're working on. And all they really want is just to provide, code sample from an expert so they know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then they can move on. So they don't want to have to spend lots of time trying to dig and search for what's, the policy that the organization has set out or what are the best practices. This was one of the largest groups that we found, and this is the reason why code samples kind of comes up as a recurring item in what they're looking for. And then the last smallest group was really I want to be an expert in the subject because it's important for my career. So these are the folks that they recognize security as something that's growing in need in terms of the developer ecosystem out there, and there's an opportunity for them to level up in their skill set and become a real expert, which gives them an opportunity to advance in their career. So there's a small group that really want to be those security champions, which is great to see. I'd love to see more people in that group, but those are the three different types of personas that sort of came out of a lot of our interview sessions. Content is king. You hear that often, but really code sample is king. I covered some of this already, so I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, but certainly the interviews we did reinforced what we found from the survey. And just to add a little bit more to that, I think, their order of where they search was to go first to their internal documentation, if they have existing code and repositories or teams like security champion teams that they could rely on for answering some of those questions for them. Secondary, they would go to sort of the established expert in that area. So particularly if they were working on a specific vendor product or platform, whether it's AWS or Azure or various tools from Google and things, they often have their own security guidance, and so they go there as a secondary step. Third, they go to the developer websites. And one of the things that's important to note about which sites they go to, Stack Overflow came up more time and again. And the main reason was because of the moderation and the voting system that it provides. So if you go and you just search something on Google, it was often difficult for them to identify whether whoever's providing that information is actually an expert and they know what they're doing. You often see people that just have an opinion, or they're maybe being nefarious and they tell you to do the wrong thing. Stack Overflow, because they have a ranking system, you can tell if there's hundreds of people that have upvoted it and there's lots of good content and discussion around it. It gives them more confidence that this is the right thing to implement. And then trailing that, they would go to a general search engine like Google, which tended to bring up things like Stack Overflow anyways, but there was a variety of other independent blogs and articles and things like that were out there. So really the code samples, again, is what they are after, and the explanation around those can add a lot of value and context for them, but only if it's coming from a trusted source. So if they don't have the confidence that that's the right thing to do, then they can't necessarily do it, and they have to keep looking. And the longer it takes them to find these results, the slower it is to deliver their software to the market. We also had some questions around integrated training with the development workflow. We try to do some innovative things where we can deliver the training right into the tools that developers are using. And most of them said that was a really great feature to have, but it was only relevant, it was only useful if the content itself was very relevant to what they were doing and it was quality content. So if you're delivering content that's not relevant, then it really doesn't add a lot of value to have that integrated into the workflow. And then the other highlight, again, an obvious one, that training needs are different and constantly changing. So within a project, within an organization, you've got lots of different roles. You've got senior, you've got junior. Some of it's compliance-based, some of it's developer-centric. So, the ability to sort of pick and choose the type of content that is most appropriate for a given individual or a given team is really important. It didn't sound like there's a lot of companies that are doing that well. Obviously, they're sourcing the content if they've got multiple different LMS systems out there. But the effort it takes to actually consolidate those, group them into different categories, distribute those out to the teams, and then report on them is very, very manual at the moment. And it's a very arduous process. So not too many people are doing it effectively. And this is another area where we feel there's a lot of opportunity for us to improve that in our own products and services. What matters most, and this is coming out of the interviews, was interesting. Very top level metrics matter most to managers. So that reporting, both from a compliance perspective, really what they want to know is the training delivering more secure code as they continue to evolve and deliver products to markets. But there's not an easy way to correlate that. If they've taken training, has it resulted in secure code? So they tend to fall back to course completion rates, test scores, and they use those as a proxy to see how successful the program is that they're rolling out. Reputation matters to developers. So both the individual and the team-based scoring ranking, again, this came out in terms of leaderboards and gamification. They were more engaged with those types of things. To be able to establish themselves as an expert within the organization or externally in the public when they're looking for new roles was really important to them. And then certification was the one that was really something that mattered to both of them. So with the managers, the number of developers in the organization that are industry certified was another proxy metric for them to say how successful their training program has been. And then the developers themselves were really keen on having that because it establishes them as an expert with their peers within the organization, but also outside of the organization. And it's critical for them in terms of future jobs and roles and things like that. What works best, I covered this a little bit already, so I won't spend too much time on it, but basically engaging and relevancy are the most important things. Managers indicated that they saw better results for hands-on training, interactive, because it engaged the developers more. Both of them indicated that if it's relevant to their tasks, that was of critical importance, especially when they're using this on a day-to-day basis or at least a couple times a week, because security has become so prominent. Some of the examples of the interactive stuff: capture the flag, hackathons, but the security hackathons where you're actually trying to hack something as opposed to the sort of innovation ones that happen fairly regularly. And then a combination of in-person training where you've got an expert that you can actually ask questions to and collaborate with and learn from in that way. And then the other one was being able to assign content based on training groups, either by related skill sets or roles. So again, this one was a bit more of a challenge, but there were some people that had done this well. Being able to sort of identify, the technology stack that they're using, anything that might be specific to a project. So if you're going into Europe and you need to be GDPR compliant, if you're dealing with the government and you have to follow NIST regulations, and then varying the levels of experience. So between beginner and advanced, really giving beginner material to an advanced developer is not going to add much value to at all. Advanced material to a beginning developer is a little bit overwhelming for them to intake. So really being able to sort of take the relevant training content that you have in your library and deliver it to subsets of groups in an appropriate way can have a lot of impact on the effect of the program itself. Okay, so we are pretty much right on time. I think we've got about 20 minutes left or so for Mrunmayee to jump into the demo. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Again, while Mrunmayee is doing this, feel free to jump on the Q&A or the chat, and I'll monitor those, and we can stop and pause and talk about those a little bit more. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to you, Mrunmayee.
Thank you, Trevor. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're enjoying our conference so far. So as Trevor mentioned, I'm going to give you a short demo of our just-in-time training available in the SD Elements solution. And before we get to that, let me just share my screen. So just a minute here. I hope you can see my screen. So for those of you who are not familiar with SD Elements, we had a wonderful demo earlier today by Brandon, which gets into a lot more detail. But just a quick overview, what SD Elements does is injects, it's our solution that injects security and compliance early and throughout the fast-moving DevOps cycle. So this makes it easier for organizations to balance their speed of development while still keeping their security risks low. And so how it does this is by significantly automating certain proactive security processes like threat modeling or risk assessment or secure coding. And it combines this with a comprehensive library of security content that has been developed by our in-house research team, and it's continuously updated. And this results in better collaboration between our security, between our clients' security and engineering organizations. So a very, very high-level overview of how SD Elements works before we jump to the demo. So it has 4 major components. The first is our survey, which is the information gathering component, which lets security teams collaborate with engineering to gather relevant data about the applications that are being developed. data about language, technology, the stack, any deployment tools that are in use. And then it combines this with our internal library guidance, as well as any content that has been customized by your organization. And it outputs a series of recommendations for each phase of your development cycle. So right from architecture, design, to development, testing, and deployment. And then beyond that, it integrates with within your development environment. So it can work with your issue trackers that are in use with Jira. It works with your scanning tools to make sure that all the recommendations are being followed by your engineering teams. And it generates a wide variety of reports for management and auditing purposes. So let me just quickly jump into the demo now. So what we have here is a fictional organization that we set up. We call it the Wealth Secure Bank. And Wealth Secure Bank has a number of applications that are currently being worked on by their development teams. We have one here called the Credit Risk Application that we've set up in our SD Elements solution. And within this, we have a project, Project Acme, which is a major update to their, let's say, to their backend code. So Wealth Secure's enterprise security team here, their SMEs, have come into SD Elements, and they have customized the survey questions that will be shown to the development teams. So these survey questions are collecting information about the language, the framework, the platforms that are in use for the Acme project. So for example, we have this as a Django application. Some of these questions can be pre-filled by choosing the Django profile. And I don't want to spend too long on this, just quickly moving to the summary. So the idea is that this survey will be collaboratively filled out by the security team in conjunction with the project managers, the architects, and the development teams working on the project. And then based on their answers and the relevant content in a library, a classification will be assigned to that project, as well as a risk policy can be assigned to that project, which is completely customizable based on your organization's internal guidance and policies. So after this survey is filled out, what is shown is a set of tasks for every phase of your SDLC. So we have architecture design tasks, development tasks, and as you can see, we have a number of them. So what the risk policy does is it lets your teams focus on the most important tasks, the high priority tasks. So for example, about 50 development tasks are then reduced to 14, and which ones are shown is also completely customizable. So let's take one of these tasks. For example, I have here, I think I have one open here. So T29, let me take this one. So what a task shows is a high-level description of the vulnerability, any applicable CWEs, a way to mitigate that vulnerability at a high level, but also because of the information that has been gathered in the survey about the specific language and technology in use, it can show you some detailed how-tos on how to mitigate this vulnerability. So there are some great code samples that have been compiled by our in-house research team. So they come from a verifiable source as opposed to developers going to Stack Overflow, as Trevor mentioned. So they can just use these code samples. Also, this can be sent to the issue tracker that is in use by your development team. So we have various integrations available. I have a Jira integration here, and they can be set up to sync daily or hourly or manually. I'm syncing manually in this case. And just to jump to Jira, so let's say that the Acme project's development team has this Jira backlog. So all the tasks that the security team has identified as high priority to fix are then sent over to Jira as issues. And they are clearly called out as coming from SD Elements. So we can look at this again in Jira, and this is what your developers will typically see. So as I mentioned before, we have a great level of detail about what the vulnerability is and how to mitigate it. Why is it assigned a certain priority by a research team, code samples based on the answers that were selected, as well as the just-in-time training modules, which is what we want to focus on today. So as you can see, based on the survey answers, our training and research teams have basically divided our entire training library into small, easily digestible modules. They are very short, and so the developers are presented only training that is highly relevant to the task at hand for them. So let me pause for any questions right now. All right, so just moving on, so we can look at maybe one of these modules here.
Cross-site request forgery, or CSRF, is a type of security vulnerability where a user's browser is tricked by a third-party site into performing actions on websites that the user is logged into. Web servers that don't verify requests can cause clients to be exploited by releasing private information or running unknown code. Attackers frequently make these requests using URLs, loading images, or XML HTTP requests. For resources exposed by RESTful web services, it's important to make sure all put, post, and delete requests are protected from cross-site request forgery using tokens. However, be aware that even with tokens, CSRF is still a problem, unless you've properly protected your web service against XSS first. An anti-CSRF token is a session or transaction-specific string of random characters associated with important transactions, like buying stock on a brokerage site. When handling the client's request, the server ensures that the anti-CSRF token is the value expected for that session or transaction. If the token is an unexpected value, the API denies the transaction. This helps protect against CSRF because each request has at least one unique parameter that an attacker can't know ahead of time.
So as you can see, developers are being presented with information that is highly relevant to their current task at hand. And we are trying to do this in various formats. So for example, as Trevor mentioned, a senior developer might not want to go through a training video. They could use the code sample to refer to, or a junior developer, for example, would need a little bit of an overview of what the vulnerability is and how to mitigate it. So we are trying to present the same information in various formats for different levels of learners. And as these tasks are marked as done by the developers, and as they are, as the videos are watched, the status can be tracked by the security teams within SDE itself. So these tasks will then be marked complete. We can go into one and just look at it. So it can show you a note as to when it was completed, who marked the task complete, as well as any trainings that have been watched while this task was being worked on. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's basically our just-in-time training module that is an add-on to our SD Elements solution. And before I give it back to Trevor, let me just show you quickly our library. So this is covered in a great level of detail in our other product demos. But so as you can see, it's very comprehensive. It has been compiled by our in-house research team. It has a number of weaknesses and information related to regulations that could be applicable. It can be customized to add your internal security and privacy policies. And we have also a way of enabling and disabling certain content here. So if something is not applicable to your organization, you can disable it. We have content related to application security, compliance, various compliance regulations, as you can see here. Operational security, so securing cloud, containers, and all this can be completely customized. So let me just jump back to the presentation very quickly. So yeah, we've already covered this, but just-in-time training is basically short videos that are extremely relevant to the tasks at hand that are presented to your development team. And they are either developed standalone or they have been extracted from our entire library of e-learning. And this is important because as industry experts believe, almost 90% of training is completely lost within 1 week from the human mind. So this makes sure that the training is relevant and it really sticks. And your security teams can be, they can ensure that the developers are receiving content that is relevant. So handing it back to you, Trevor.
Okay. Yeah, if you stop sharing, I'll bring my screen up.
Sure.
We had one question from Callian at FINRA, which I mentioned I would take I would reach out to him offline on that one. But as Mrunmayee suggested, we do have our sort of out-of-the-box content, both in terms of the training modules as well as the content, the sort of tasks and the problems and the regulations. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is the requirement that a developer sees in Jira that has the training modules attached to it. In terms of what I was speaking about earlier, one of the things that's really powerful about this is if you can have an understanding of what each project team is working on, and the survey gives you the ability to understand the technology stack as well as who's on that team, it makes it easier for you to deliver the right training to the right individuals at the right time. The other really big benefit of this is because SD Elements is tied into your entire development lifecycle, and it has the ability to integrate with systems like Jira, with GitHub, or other tools that your developers are using, you start to collect some really relevant data that allows you to tie the impact of the training the developers are seeing on the security posture or the risk of the overall project that they happen to be working on. So again, we have lots of data that we collect, and we expose a number of it through APIs that allows you to go in and actually see and pull reports in a lot of different ways to understand how well your program is working in the context of the actual projects, and be able to see the underlying business impact on those. So we've only got about 10 minutes left. What I was going to do next, I have a couple points I wanted to talk about at the end, but I wanted to show you guys a bit of a preview on another product that we released recently. So this here, I just wanted to showcase sort of the high-level topics of some of the library content we have as part of our general e-learning courseware. And then I was going to show you a bit of the hands-on training lab. So this is our internal login, our LMS system, and you can see all of the variety of training courses that I've not started yet, reset this. But this one is our inversion, our OWASP virtual lab. So what this does is it provides you with a virtual machine where we're actually running a sample application with lots of flaws and vulnerabilities in it. So if I launch that, it brings you into this type of a screen here. So this is relatively new for us. We launched it towards the beginning of the year. We've got a couple of customers that are running it on pilot, and we're just starting to roll it out now and make it an offering to the general customer base we have. But you can see we've got this Exploit Me bank in here, and this is something that we built internally. It looks and feels like a regular online banking application. So you log in and you get a virtual machine. So it's completely safe sandbox. You can do whatever you want on this, and it can reset easily. And then just to the side of it, you can see that we've got sort of the training material. And what it does is it walks the developer through, how you can go in and expose some of these vulnerabilities, understand where the vulnerabilities are, when you can sort of hack away at this. And we have both. So if I'll just go back here, we have both the beginner and the advanced version. So if you go through the advanced version, it gives you a lot less information. It sees what you can do without actually giving you the hand holding through it, versus the beginner, where it actually tells you, exactly how you can use various tricks to sort of log in. It walks you through how to, open up the source code or look at the inspector. and it takes you through a series of exercises and then provides you some quizzes at the end that measures how well you've done on this. So this is something that we're pretty excited about. It's one of the things that we certainly heard in terms of the interactive part of it, what developers are looking for, and I think addressing the needs of both the more advanced developers as well as the beginning developers. It gives them the ability to sort of learn at their own pace. You can pause this at any time and you can go back to it, and it'll still be there exactly where you left it off. It's all web-based, so it's very easy to access. And so, this is a very early version of it for us, but we're looking to expand on this more and get some feedback from people as they start to use it. So. All right, so that was just a sort of brief demo there. The only last thing I wanted to talk about was, oops. I just need to jump ahead in my slides. I was off from where Mrunmayee was. Okay, so just wanted to have some final comments and sort of leave you with some finishing thoughts in terms of where we think security, application security training is going. Again, nothing too mind-boggling here. This isn't sort of what's going to be like in 20 years from now. It's more where we see things evolving in the next couple of years, and certainly this is a reflection of areas that we're planning to focus on based on what we believe is going to be most helpful and supportive to organizations, in achieving that vision of building a world where you can trust the technologies that's out there because you have confidence in the security. One, security awareness is a job requirement. Expertise is a differentiator. So I think for developers in particular, having some level of security experience is almost a requirement these days, certainly when you're working in highly regulated industries where there's a high sensitivity to security breaches and vulnerabilities. So I think having that as a developer is definitely going to be important, and having expertise in it is really going to be a differentiator for developers. We know firsthand from hiring developers out there that people with security expertise are a very rare lot. They're very hard to find. We have a lot of them. We also know that they're not very cheap. And so that expertise comes with a lot of benefits if you train yourself effectively. Interactive examples and samples will be critical. I think the ability to provide source code samples and commentary on those from an expert that you can trust. Ideally, if you have an internal team that can do that, then you have no questions there. But if you can get it from a source that is curating it, that has their own group of experts, even better. And then actionable guidance is really critical. Again, we're more focused on helping the developers secure the applications that they're building. We also do address the compliance need, but in order to make sure that the applications that are being built are secure, we're really focused on helping the developers do their day-to-day in the most effective way possible. And we think the interactive examples and samples is going to really start to grow. And the nice thing about SD Elements is that you can actually see the impact on the business as a result of it because of the way we integrate into all these software development lifecycle tools. We see this a little bit, but not much. And I think, for those that have the resources and the capacity to do it, they often take a lot of what's provided from the providers out there like ourselves, and they take their own experts and leaders and then they expand on it. So, they take it from just best practices in a PDF document to actual code samples and reference architectures within their own domain. And they have more of a collaboration. And then further, they sort of open it up to the other teams to have the same level of interaction and commenting and discussion that you see on sites like Stack Overflow. They use that a lot internally as well. So there's not a lot of people that are doing that effectively at the moment, but we certainly get a lot of demand for people who want to extend the training that we've provided and either take it in a different direction, or they want to have their own nuances that are specific to the organization and overlay it with that. And so in SD Elements, we do have the ability to create custom content, as well as the ability to append or add amendments to the existing content we have. And we think people are going to start to take more and more advantage of that. Again, this one's not too much of a showstopper. It's already going in this direction, but learning is definitely moving to be multi-channel. So, the more traditional approach of having sort of standard courseware, whether it's reading material or videos that are more passive and less interactive, will still be relevant in some cases, but the courses and quizzes are starting to get supplemented with interactive platforms, things like micro modules and bite-sized learning, podcasts, a reading library, instructor-led courses. There's a multitude of ways that people can learn. And I think that, given that self-direction is a really high priority for them, and the type and the format of content that they choose to consume in order to advance their learning, you want to provide them as many opportunities as possible. And so again, we're hoping to build that out a little bit more and get to the point where we can allow people to, pick and choose what they feel is most effective for their particular situation. And these last two, I think, are where, I feel there's a lot of opportunity here that's untapped still. So I think, we're seeing a movement already from the one-size-fits-all training to being a little bit more role-specific. Where I feel there's a huge opportunity is leveraging artificial intelligence and the reams of data that you have on your systems, on your projects, on the teams that are developing those systems, and getting to the point where you can start to automatically recommend what is most pertinent to those individuals depending on the project and the activity. So again, if you've got a team that's building a Java-based application and they need to be PCI compliant, you can gather some of that information from the source code repositories. You can tell roughly what they're trying to do based on the JIRA requirements they've got. You can know what systems they have internally, what cloud they're building on. And if you have a robust library that can be mixed and matched to address, very specific needs, so you can send an actionable requirement to a developer that's focused on, how to be PCI compliant in Java with a particular requirement that you're building. And you can give that to them in an easy way in the midst of their development workflow. I think we can really improve their time to market and make their jobs easier. So we're really going for make it fun, make it interactive, make it easy, and be very actionable and relevant to the course, to the developer at hand. So, allow them to do what they need to do and have the confidence that it's doing the right thing. So we're a long way from that as an organization, as an industry. But I think that's definitely a direction where we see the light, we see the path to get there, and it's something that we're really focused on. And the last one is, as I suggested, it's going to be more integrated into the software development lifecycle as a whole. I think having the ability to correlate the training and the program that you're running with the actual impact to the business, and the main way that you can do that is by correlating the training to the individuals and the individuals to the projects, and then tying that back to the overall security posture of a given system or a project that you happen to be working on. It gives you much better metrics on how effective your programs are. And again, a lot of this comes back to the data that you can collect and how you organize that data, and then how you can actually put that data to work by recommending the right things to the people and reporting on it. So again, nothing too groundbreaking here in terms of the future of e-learning and application security. But there's definitely a lot of opportunities to do a better job than what we have been doing. And we're certainly focused on that and building out our product roadmap for the next couple of years. And we'd be happy to share that with you guys. If you want to learn more, please contact any of us individually. There's lots of people in the session that can provide you more information and details if you want to deep dive into the demos. But other than that, that concludes our discussion. I know I didn't leave a ton of time for questions, but there wasn't too much interaction throughout, so it didn't seem like there was a lot. But have a few minutes left. Happy to answer any other questions that you guys have. If you want to throw something in the chat, if you have anything in the Q&A, now's the time to ask it. We'll give it a few minutes, but if there's nothing coming up, then we'll let you guys go on and either get some lunch or move on to the next session. And I guess I'll just say thanks for everyone who attended. It was a pleasure to speak to you guys, even though I can't see everyone. Really looking forward to being able to come to some of these sessions in person and socialize a little bit more. But hopefully some of you guys will be online for the drink session at the end of the day, and we can chat a little bit more there. Right, looks like there's not much activity here. So I think I'm going to end the session 1 minute early, and hope you guys appreciate it, and we'll talk to y'all soon.